Once you've really been able to look yourself in the mirror and have that conversation with yourself, then I think it's who you want to be is who you need to start acting like that person each and every day, right? If I want to be someone that's highly successful, how would they act in this situation? How would they handle this challenge? If they have a difficult thing come up in their business, are they going to complain about it? Are they going to cry and moan about it? Or how would they handle that situation? And I think that's very powerful because before you know it, that is just your natural cadence to how you handle challenges and tough situations.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Medicare Sales Playbook. I'm your host, Dallas Keithley, and it is an honor and a privilege to jump into wherever you are, whether you're in your car, whether you're on your phone, whether you're on your computer pretending to work. We love the fact that you are here listening to us, and my goal is always to help you grow your Medicare Sales Playbook. I messed that up. I'm going to go back 10 seconds. It's an honor for us to be here, and it is my job to help you grow your Medicare business one play at a time. And the fact that you guys allow us to do that, man, I hold that in very high esteem. I want to jump right into it today. I've got somebody here that we've been efforting for some time. I've met this gentleman through Cody Askins and through all the events that we go to with him. And just first of all, noticed his haircut, and you'll see what I mean here in just a second. Knew that he had something special going on, but then, man, I started hearing him talk. Started hearing him speak, and you can just tell sometimes that people know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. They are in the business to help people, and then I started hearing other people talk about this guy, and I loved what I heard. So please help me welcome to the show, Mr. Christian Brindle from Everything Senior Insurance. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Dallas, for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I'm excited. I'm excited to have a good conversation and bring some value to your audience.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I very much appreciate you doing this. When we're recording this, we're right in the middle of AEP. It is October 29th, and so asking a Medicare guy to take some time out of his day and talk to me about Medicare, I kind of expected to get laughed out of the building, but you're like, yeah, man, whenever, let's do it. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. It's definitely a tricky time of year, and if this was, 3 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, it probably would have been more of that type of reaction, whereas it would have been a little tougher to do it. But these days, I don't personally do a lot of selling as much anymore. And, and I love doing podcasts. I love doing content. So any way I can kind of free up time to do that, I'm always there for it.
And dude, that's what I like about you. Now, I've only known you, I've met you a handful of times, but I've watched your content, and there is a spirit about you that, hey, let's just help everybody. A lot of agents go in, some agents go in and they say, hey, I'll help somebody if it benefits me.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but your attitude is let's just help everybody and then it'll benefit me a lot.
Yeah, 100%. My viewpoint and my strategy has really always been, if you get what you give, and a rising tide lifts all boats. That's kind of how I conduct myself in everything that I do in my company, and it's boded true, for sure. And so I always try to just bring value. I believe in the power of being a magnet in your business, and what you put out there really attracts people to doing business with you. There's so many people in our business nowadays where they continuously play the game of chase with their prospects, with their clients, whatever it is. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you certainly have to do that. It's certainly part of the game. But any way that you can find to get people to be attracted to you by what you're putting out there, it's just a great way to do business, and it helps people know that you're the type of person and individual they want to work with.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. I want to jump right in because when I spoke to you about, hey, Christian, I always ask this question when you're coming on the podcast, because I want to help new agents. I want to help existing agents, and we can all grow. Man, I've learned so much from this podcast, and I've been in the business 23 years. But when you're looking at agents, I always ask the question, what is something that you are passionate about that you can teach on and that you feel like, hey, I've got something to give here? And you immediately said helping agents build a business that is something they can be proud of, but building it correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So I would love to jump right in there. I see a lot of agents. We had Tony Holland on here a couple of weeks ago. He talked about the same thing. He's like, man, I see agents out there and they're building something, but they're doing it so poorly. First off, what are some common mistakes that you see agents making when they start to build their business?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that agents, when they first get started, they do to make it harder on themselves, right? I think there's a couple different ways we can kind of attack this, and there's a list of 100 different things I could kind of come up with, but I'll just kind of give you a few. One thing that I see agents all of the time do that makes it hard on them is let's take it from a couple different perspectives. Let's talk about when they first get started, but then let's also talk about once they start to build some momentum that keeps them from growing, right? Because they're two very different conversations, I feel like. When they first get started, one thing that agents really do that make it hard on them, in my personal opinion, is they try to take advice from everyone at the same time. I'm sure you see this all the time, Dallas, on your end too, right?
Yes.
Like, it's enough to drive you crazy. Here's the deal. There's a lot of ways to build this business. There's a lot of ways to build a clientele. And there's certain things that are just like, yes, you have to do that. There's certain things that's like, no, you shouldn't do that. That's wrong. That's dumb. But there's also a lot of different things that work, right? And it's not necessarily always a right or a wrong way, right? It's just different ways of doing things, different strokes for different folks, right? So, one thing I see agents get into all the time in this trap is they're brand new, they've sold 2 policies maybe, and they're reaching out and asking for advice from like 25 different people. And here's the deal. You can't have 25 different mentors because their information is going to contradict each other because everybody has a different way of doing the business. And to get started, what you need is a proof of concept as an agent. What you need is to be able to latch on to a proven method that somebody can teach you. And like, if someone's learning from me, right, and I'm their mentor, and I'm like, okay, this is the way I think you should do this. And it's like, okay, we're going down a different way. Let's say we're trying to teach somebody, let's say someone wants to do face-to-face, for example, right? Teaching them to go out to houses, do face-to-face, whatever the case might be. They're like, well, I saw a guy online that says I can build through doing webinars. It's like, okay, yeah, you can, certainly, but you just got your license 30 days ago, dude. Let's start somewhere, right? Let's make sure we can crawl before we're trying to run. And so I think that's a big mistake that people try to make, is I think they try to take advice from too many different people, and they ultimately end up in a place where they don't know who to listen to and they don't know what to do. Right? Whereas they would be better off, even if it wasn't the most efficient advice, right? They'd be better off taking one piece of advice and running with it, because they'd start to build some foundation. They can figure out what works for them as they start to figure out what this is, like what this actual career in business is, right? But you can't get to that point if you don't develop any kind of foundation. And that's a big mistake I see a lot of agents make. Another thing I see a lot of agents make once they start to get a little further down the road, right? Let's say they have 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 clients, whatever the case might be, they start to build some momentum, they have an actual business, is just not being willing to spend money and not being willing to hire people. Because
when do you, I want to jump in there.
Yeah, please.
Because this is something I hammer home all the time. At what point do I start, especially in the Medicare world, life insurance, we talk to them when we sell them, send them a happy birthday card, and talk to their family when they pass.
Yeah.
Medicare, if you're not protecting that residual income, it will go away. At what point do you say, okay, it's time for me financially, work-wise, all of that, to start looking into to a staff?
Yeah. I mean, I've been asked this question a million times, as I know you have as well, right? And the answer that I've come, to peace with, if you will, that I feel like is the right answer, is it depends on the person, but the right answer is going to really be as soon as you can afford to, right? Because as soon as you can afford to, your business is going to be supercharged, and it's going to grow exponentially faster whenever you bring on help, because what you're doing is you're scaling your own time. You're scaling what you can actually put your time and effort towards. So I think it's going to be different for everybody, right? Everybody's got a different situation. Everybody's got different types of bills. Some people get in when they're really young, their early 20s. They don't have a family. They don't have a mortgage. They don't really have many bills. They're lean in their lifestyle. But then you get a guy that comes in that maybe, 35, 40, he's coming off of some other career and he's got 3 kids, he's got a wife, he's got a mortgage, right? So the answer is going to be different probably for everybody, because depending on where you're at in life. But I think the answer that I would communicate to everybody is as soon as you can. Because if you can and you're not, your business growth is just going to slow down slowly but surely until it just totally dies and you're not growing anymore. And you're a bit on a hamster wheel.
Yeah. And, we all have ceilings. Every one of us. Your ceiling may be higher than mine. Probably is higher than mine, right?
Well, I don't know about that.
I've got to work with some really great people over the years. I've got to work with some monster agents. I've worked with agents in our office that are producing, during AEP, they're producing over 1,000 applications on their own pen. But even that is a ceiling.
Sure.
And so you talked about scaling scaling your time. I've always told people the time to hire is right before you think you need somebody. I love working with Brian Askins. He always says, hey, let's hire somebody and then let's grow, kind of anticipate the growth. But it's also when I can look at it and say, okay, I've got to pay this person X amount of dollars per week. That means, if it's $1,000 per week, that's 2 applications. So will hiring this person net me 2 applications? If the answer is yes, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think, when you look at it from that kind of standpoint, and I think you can look at a lot of things from that kind of standpoint, right? Like for a lot of agents, it's hiring people, but for other agents, it's like there's a training that they can take, or there's some kind of thing they can add to their business, and they're looking at the cost. It's like, okay, how many new clients would this have to bring me to make it worth it? And the answer is usually surprisingly a small amount.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to look at it. I'm such a big believer in, trying to find ways to get more done in your organization. Of course, for your listeners that are watching this that are just brand new, those people they're not there yet, right? It's going to take some time for them to get there. But there's so many agents I work with, and I know you do too, that they have a good size book of business. Maybe they have 600 to 800, maybe they have 1,000 clients, whatever the case might be. And they're a one-man show and their growth just totally stops, and sometimes they get there really quickly. Sometimes, they get there really fast and then all of a sudden it's just a halt, right? Because they reach that ceiling we're talking about. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's understandable. Not everybody wants the same thing, but at the same time, if people better understood the value of an hour of their time, that what they could accomplish, there's no telling for a lot of agents in our industry.
That is important. That is great, man. Understanding your value, and your value is going to increase as you get better. Go back. Let's talk to that agent. Man, just got my license. Right? Like I'm going to sell grandma and grandpa. I'm going to sell my wife's grandma and grandpa. And then I have no idea what to do. To them, this may even seem a little bit silly talking about it like a business. You're like, man, it's not a business. I want to talk about 2 things. First of all, looking at it, Tony Merwin, when I had him on the podcast, he did a great job explaining this. He said, we knew what we wanted to look like, and we went ahead and acted like we were that person. Talk about acting like here's what I have envisioned. Let's go ahead and put it into focus.
Yeah, I love it. And I love Tony, by the way. Tony's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Good friend, old friend. And he's got a lot of value to bring. So yeah, I feel like, from the time that you first get started, you have to have an idea of who you want to be. A book I read in the past year was Patrick Bet-David's Your Next 5 Moves. If anybody hasn't read that book, I highly suggest it. I've been in business for almost 11 years in the insurance space. and I've read a lot of books. I've always been a big advocate of, growth and development and just learning and trying to be a better me. And that was probably one of my favorite books I ever read. And one thing that he talks about, the first step, the first move in your 5 moves, is essentially how he positions it, is identifying who you want to be. And I think that is so important in setting your goals at the beginning of your journey, right? I think so many people, they look at somebody else and they're like, oh, look at Dallas. Look at everything that Dallas has accomplished in decades in the business, right? But maybe you don't want to be Dallas. Maybe you have different aspirations.
Set them goals higher, baby.
Or maybe, maybe even me, maybe Christian Brindle. Maybe you look at me, and you see what we're doing, but maybe you don't want to be me. Maybe you want something more than what I've accomplished. Maybe you want a call center, right? And I think identifying who you want to be is such a powerful thing to really kind of capture there. And then I think from there, once you've really been able to look yourself in the mirror and have that conversation with yourself, then I think it's who you want to be is who you need to, again, like, to reiterate what Tony said, that's when you need to start acting like that person each and every day, right? And making sure that you're telling yourself on a day-to-day basis, if I want to be someone that's highly successful, how would they act in this situation? How would they handle this challenge? If they have a difficult thing come up in their business, are they going to complain about it? Are they going to, cry and moan about it? Or how would they handle that situation? And I think that's very powerful, because before you know it, that is just your natural cadence to how you handle challenges and tough situations. So I think that's very important.
I love that. So that kind of tackles the thought process of, here's what I want to do. I'm going to act like I'm already that person, because you will never get more than what you shoot for. Like, you might get lucky here and there and land a big case, but consistently, you're not going to be the big business that you dream of if you don't dream of it. Mm-hmm. Let's get a little more hands-on. I like to give people something that's more hands-on. What are some of the things, as far as like structuring your business from the beginning, so that it is something that can grow? Like, talk about setting yourself up as an LLC, setting yourself up with the right people, the tax guy, the attorney. And again, this may seem silly to somebody that's just wrote Meemaw and Peepaw. That's all they have. But man, you're building that base. What are some things that you wish you could go back and tell Christian Brindle 11 years ago, set this up now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I didn't incorporate until I was 3 years in as a producer, and I couldn't tell you how much extra costs that had, that caused me to have to pay, right? And taxes and all kinds of other things. So creating a corporation from the get-go, right? And I always tell people, like, people say, well, I don't know if I want to create a corporation. I don't know if I'm going to be in this long term. I feel like when you have that type of mentality, you're planning to fail. It's almost like this thought process of like, let's see what happens, right? If you're in this and you're committed to making this work, start a corporation. It's not that expensive. It's pretty cheap, actually. And it protects you legally and opens you up to so many more tax advantages than you could ever get as, an independent contractor, like is what you are as an agent when you're not incorporated. So that's one that I think is really big. You hit it right on the head. I think having a really good CPA to advise you, I think as you go, it gets more and more important to have people that are experts at things that you don't need to be an expert in. I think another big mistake that a lot of people make that kind of, ties into this conversation we're having right now is they think they have to be an expert at everything. They think they have to learn everything and be an expert at everything. But if you make a habit from the get-go of working with people and having people in your inner circle that you can work with, like your tax guy's a great one, right? Your tax guy's forgotten more about tax breaks than you're ever going to learn by reading up on Google about it, right? And so having somebody in your corner like a tax guy is going to be good. Probably not right at the beginning, but a good attorney is never a bad thing, right? A contract lawyer is never a bad thing.
You're speaking from experience here, Christian.
Sure, certainly. Yeah. But I think that's a good way to kind of think about this, right? And then Also, I feel like one thing that in terms of structure in your business is too many agents wait too long to start branding themselves, right? I think
Hmm.
in today's day and age, in your brand is something that's going to be able to carry your agency at a certain point. It's not going to be day one, certainly, but what do I mean by brand? Your
Yeah,
brand,
that's what I will do next.
yeah, your brand is how people identify you, right? It's more than a logo. It's a messaging for your business. It's how your business and how you as an agent made somebody feel when you took them on as a client. All of those things. And you know, if I could start over from day one, we would start a Google My Business page from day one. Every single client would be leaving us reviews. We'd be starting YouTube channels, doing, not everyday videos, but occasional videos about Medicare education. Those kind of things long term, it's not going to build your business from day one. You have to get out and you have to hustle and grind and, you know, um, pound the pavement a little bit at the beginning. But those things on the side, too many agents wait too long to kind of build those things. And,
Right. Yeah.
like,
Then you got to kind of go backwards and
yes.
yeah, exactly.
And so
Love that.
I think that's a really good thing that, in terms of the structure of your business is have, we talk about vision for your business and your company, right? Is what is your brand going to look like? Because the best agencies have monster and super reputable brands that bring in more business than you can imagine. And
Wow.
I think that's a very important key that new agents just don't think about. They think it's so far ahead of them, right? Their brand, their company, everything like that. Again, it's not going to carry you to the finish line. It's not going to carry you to the promised land of where you want to go with your goals. But if you work on it and put a little bit of a time into it here and there, just a little bit of time, a little bit of time, a little bit of time, a little bit of time developing it, as time goes on, you'll have a ton of Google reviews. You'll be ranked locally in your area for Medicare advisors. People will find you organically, right? Like I've always said,
Mhm.
there's only one type of lead that's better than a referral, and that's somebody that found you online that has read up on you and studied you and called you anyway, because they
Wow.
know a lot about you.
Called you in spite of you. Yeah.
Right, right. In
Love
spite of
that.
you.
Yeah.
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 And so, I think structuring from day one, setting up your, so having the right people in your corner, I think setting up a corporation is a great thing to do, but also, making sure that it's not always necessarily you, the insurance agent, but, your brand
That's
overall. I
cool.
think, I think that's a good message.
That's great, man. And when I introduced you, we talked about everything seniors. So you're going through the rebranding process right
Mm-hmm.
now. What were some things, real quickly, what were some things that you said, okay, this is what I want? Why a new brand? And these are some things that I want in my brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and a lot of these things we're talking about when it comes to branding, you guys, for everybody that's listening to this, it comes from experience, right? So if we rewind, when I got started in the business, it was only me, of course, just like everybody, right? I didn't have any staff, I didn't have any employees. It was me as an agent on my own, one man show. And, I was 21 when I got into the business. And at the time, I was like, oh, I'm going to brand me. So I called the company Christian Brindle Insurance Services. I named it after me. Now it's become very well known nationally with that name, despite that name,
Mhm.
right? Because it's you hear the name and it sounds like a guy in his basement kind of deal. We still to this day. I had a billboard up a year or two ago, and guy calls in, talks to one of my team members on the phone, and he was shocked that someone answered the phone other than me, because he was expecting just some guy in his basement kind of deal, because of the
Yeah.
name. And so, you know, if I knew what I knew today, I would have had those conversations about who I want to be, what I want my brand to look like, and what my future looks like from day one. But I didn't have anybody telling me this stuff from day one, right? So it comes from experience. I think the positives of branding your business after yourself is it makes you very relatable to people, right? You're very
Hmm.
relatable. You seem like a person and everything like that. The tricky thing about it is if you have very big goals and dreams, it makes it to where people look at you as smaller than you are at times. When you actually start to grow and get big, and you get people that only want to talk to you, only want to do business with you. So we've developed, very, strong guardrails and systems and protocols and everything like that to keep people away from me at this point in time. But, the business is bigger than me at this point. And so I think for us, we had the foresight of, kind of seeing what the agency can be and what the company can be. We're a makeup of 5 companies now. We're a bit of a conglomerate of sorts, and it's more than just me. It's bigger than just me.
Right.
And that's kind of where the rebrand comes in. And trust me, guys, rebranding is a pain in the ass. It's not fun.
It's expensive.
It's expensive. It takes a lot of time. People get to know your old brand. You have to teach them, and you have to really teach them, that it's changed to the new brand and everything like that. So having those conversations early and often when you first get started is a lot more valuable than I think a lot of new agents realize.
Good stuff. I like it. Okay. So I really want to switch gears here now.
Yes.
Kind of. So let's say we've got the new agent. He's got he's incorporated. He's got his people. He's got his team there. They start to grow. The quickest way to grow, you said this as we were visiting before the show, you have bought a lot of books of business. Like how would you rather do it? Would you rather go out there and, knock doors and sit down knee to knee and belly to belly and talk to people in the face and grow it one at a time? Or would you rather go out and buy a book of 500 clients or 1,000 clients or 2,000 clients? You've got some experience in this. And of course you went out and bought books of business, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. We're expecting actually to close on one of about 800 clients this week on a deal that we're doing. And we bought in several books of business. We bought books of business all the way up from, 1,000 clients down to about 15 or 20, small books of business. There's nothing better in terms of your growth, in terms of the speed of your growth, to be able to add 300, 400, 500, 1,000 new members to your book just like that. There's nothing quite like it.
Yeah.
I think that the one-on-one sales, for somebody that's new, there's so much value in that because of what it teaches you. But in terms of your overall business growth, there's really nothing quite like buying those books of business. I'll take that. I'll probably take that every time.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's walk people through. And man, as much as you're willing to give me, I'm going to take and probably go out and use today. So when you're looking for a new book of business, what are you looking for?
Yeah. So,
and we're talking Medicare, correct? You're doing all Medicare business? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what are you looking for in a book?
So what I'm looking for in a book is, there's some things that are, just obvious, right? Like age of the client. Right, average age of the client. Like if it's too old of a book, they're not going to probably be on with you that long, right? Their mortality is a thing. I'm thinking about how long the policies have been active, right? Like if you're buying a Med Sup book in a lot of states and a lot of markets with a lot of carriers, those renewals drop off quite a bit after 6 years, right? So you have to be thinking about that. You don't want to buy a book and pay a certain amount if they're at 5 years, right? You want to kind of calculate that into what you're offering. But I think one of the most underrated things, so like for us, we have a bit of a unique kind of situation. We have an internal agency, a direct to consumer agency, brick and mortar, with LOAs and everything like that. But we're licensed in 45 states because we're also an FMO. So we have a lot of contracted agents nationwide. But our internal agency, probably 75% of our clientele is here in Utah. So locally, regionally. So we know that market intimately well. And I think if you're in a market that the majority of your clients are in, for a lot of agents, they just sell in their home state, which is not a bad way to do it necessarily, because especially if you're selling Medicare Advantage plans, right? The plans can vary widely from one area to another, right? It's tough to keep up with 50 states. And so if you're selling direct to consumer, it's not a bad idea at all if somebody's in a market that you're familiar with. So for us, when we're buying books of business like the one we're closing on, hopefully this week, that's in our home market. So what that does for us is we intimately know the plans that these people are on. We know them extremely well. They blend really well in with our existing clientele. It's easy to send communications to these people. Like if we're sending, let's say, an email communication off to a member about a specific benefit they might forget about, or we want to make sure that they're utilizing or something like that, it's easier to send one email to 1,000 people than 10 emails to 100 people, because the plans are all different, right?
Wow.
And so I think where the people are is big. I think the age of the client is big. I think how long they've been on the books, all of those items are important. Also, who's the carrier? Dallas, you know this, I'm sure, right? Some carriers are easier to transfer books than others. Some have really rigid processes. Some of them don't allow it at all. Very few. There's only a couple of those, but
right.
And so that can be tricky as well. Some of them are just carriers that have a history of volatility in their plan changes. So if you're buying a book of business, you'd much rather have a plan that's going to stay relatively stable for a longer period of time, because then you don't have to rewrite those people as much, right?
Exactly.
So the carrier, what carriers they're on, is going to play a role as well. I think the combination of all of those things, to me, helps me kind of get a really good idea of what I'm looking at with a book.
Great. Good stuff. Now, let's talk actual numbers here. Now, I don't want to bore anybody, but there's somebody out there that's probably looking and saying, man, maybe I should buy a book of business. Why is it so attractive? So let's say you find a book of business that has 500 clients, right? So 500. So what is that on the residual side? Because that's basically what you're looking at is annual production, right? What's it bringing in? So I don't do math in public. So what's that? What are you looking at? If you've got 500 people, what's the value of that to you?
It's probably, and this is if you're being conservative, it's most likely going to be more than this, but it's probably minimum $150K a year in renewals.
Okay. So I've got $150K in renewals. What is a fair price to offer for that book of business?
Yeah. So this is where it gets tricky, right? So there's two different types of book of business sales, in my opinion, that you look at, right? The first type is the one that people see all the time. It's the glitz and the glamour. It's, when people are selling to Integrity, they're selling to AmeriLife, they're selling to one of these big private equity organizations, and they're getting huge amounts of money. We've all heard about it, right? People are selling for 10x their EBITDA, which I don't want to get too deep into the weeds with any new agents, but they're selling oftentimes for very large figures. What I think a lot of agents don't realize when they're looking to buy a book of business, or maybe they're looking to get out and sell a book of business, sometimes people have the expectation that's going to be them. And with those types of businesses, they're buying not just the book, but they're buying the business. Right. And so a book to me is not a business.
Right.
The book is an asset, but it's not the business. And so when they're buying the business, they're not just buying the revenue. They're not just buying the clients. They're buying the leadership. They're buying the founder. They're buying the systems, the processes, everything else in between. And so typically those people are staying on, sometimes permanently, sometimes long-term, sometimes for, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on what their agreement is. And so they're just such more complicated deals. If you're just going out and trying to buy a book and someone wants to offload a book and walk away into the sunset and, they're done, usually what I find, and it's going to vary based on all the metrics I talked about earlier in terms of what kind of book you're looking at, right? How old is it? Clients, everything like that. But usually ballpark what you're looking at for a fair exit of a book is usually 2 times the revenue.
2 times. So I'm looking at spending $300K, right? Would be fair. Okay.
And it's funny you bring up that specific amount too, because we have another book we're actually inquiring to buy that's exactly that size, a little bit over 500. And so this is that's a real life scenario that we're working on. Probably won't pull the trigger on it till January, but we're having conversations with somebody right now about it. So that's a real life scenario, in that situation. I'm hoping they won't see this. I'm just going to bank on that they won't. But in that situation, we offered 2 times up front. And that's probably the way the deal is going to go. Now you can stretch these out, right? Where maybe you do, because if you're a new agent, you're not going to have $300K you can just drop on somebody. But you can do deals where maybe you find an agent that is wanting to retire. They've been doing this a long time. They don't have any kids that are going to take over the business or anything like that. And maybe you do something where they have like a legacy payout plan over a period of time. I've seen situations where it's like, it's been 10 years they're paying somebody off, right? Like they pay a percentage of the renewals over the period of time. Maybe it's a shrinking percentage, right? Maybe it's a higher percentage the first 3, 4, 5 years, then maybe it shrinks down, then maybe it shrinks down. It just kind of shrinks over time. And sometimes that's very attractive to some of these agents that are looking to just get out of the business and be done with it all.
Right.
And so that's another way to do it too. And we've done deals like that as well. I think it just depends on, where you're at. But I've seen agents come in and they're brand new and they will actually build relationships with established agents. And that's ultimately what they end up doing, right? They maybe sell 50 policies themselves, but then they take over this established book of 1,500 clients, 2,000 clients, and then they have this built-in 20, 30-year brand, as going back to that, and reputation of this agency that they're running, which is very underrated. If I came in and I had to start from scratch today, I might consider trying to take that route than trying to build a new book all the way from scratch. I could do it, but that might be an easier way if I can find the right person that's looking to exit and it's a mutually beneficial deal.
That's incredible. Yeah, be nice to old people. And I'm one of them, so I can say that. And I'm getting closer and closer. Now, and to continue our picture, so somebody comes in, they pay $300,000, whether they get a loan or whether, like you were saying, they work something out, that money, where else can you go in and buy a business where the renewals are funding, not only funding, but overfunding the loan or whatever you're going to do, and then giving you some cash immediately that you can start working. And then what I've seen really good agents do is they go back and they start working that book. Exactly. And man, there's annuities in that book. There's hospital indemnity plans in that book. There's long-term care plans in that book. And then there's referrals in that book. Because what I've seen, just me personally, if someone is looking to retire, they probably haven't been working that book as hard as they possibly can over the last 4 or 5 years. They've just been maintaining. They've been coasting. And so there's stuff there. So there's good stuff there that can be picked out of it. Just a brilliant way to do it. I want to finish up with this question here. So you look into buying a book of business. You purchase that book of business. How do you then get those clients? Because they probably bought their policy because they liked the person that they bought it from. How do you then shift in and take care of them and tell them, hey, you're going to get the same service that you had with the last agent?
I think there's no better edification you can get than from their writing agent, right?
That's good. Yeah.
So I think it's important that I think if you ever do a deal like that with someone, that part of the deal is that the agent will, at the very least, be willing to write up a letter. You use their logo if they have a logo, something like that, and you put it into an email as well. You communicate it out to their book of business. And if you can really get a good situation going, like, this book we're about to close on now, part of our deal with that individual is if we get somebody that's very, upset about the book of business transfer. Usually usually it's not as much as you think it's going to be, but there's always a couple people, 1 or 2 people, right? That might be dramatically upset about it. That agent's willing to get on the phone and try to talk that person off the ledge for us, for a certain period of time, few and far between, but, so I think having a good relationship and working with that agent long-term, maybe not super long-term, if you do a just walk away deal, but like for a certain period of time, building in a buffer where they can still be there and they can still be pulled in certain situations, I think is big. But I think if the agent is willing to stand up and say, listen, you've put your trust in me for all these years on your policy. I trust this guy. I trust Dallas. I trust this agent. I trust Agent John. I trust Agent Mary. I think that's huge. And I think that's everything, because at the end of the day, those people do trust that agent. And by them edifying you, it helps gain their trust like nothing else, I think.
That's great. Awesome, man. Christian, thank you very much for being here with us. I want to rehash, guys. First of all, we talked about what can you be doing now? What can you be doing now that will save you time later? That's structuring your business correctly, incorporating as early as possible, making sure that your brand is something that is it's not just your name, it's something that can carry on. And when you see yourself having 10, 20, 30,000 clients down the road, it's that brand still rings true. It's also envisioning that 10,000 clients down the road and acting like you're already there. And then we talked about buying books of business and talked about how you can grow your business quickly, how to find them, what to look for, and then how to service those clients and make sure they stay on the books forever. Great stuff, Christian, man. I hope this has got to help somebody. It's helped me. Like, I'm going to go talk to a business broker as soon as we're done here, but it's helped me, and I really appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. The pleasure was all mine. It was a ton of fun. You have a great show here, and you're doing great things. So I appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to the next time.
Absolutely. Where can people find Christian Brindle?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, almost everywhere that you can consume social media, but probably the best places, my personal favorites are, we have a YouTube channel. It's just Christian Brindle, just my name. We put out agent trainings. We have 1,200 videos on the channel, something like that. And then we have a very fast growing Facebook group for Medicare agents called 7-Figure Medicare Agent. We're closing in on about 10,000 members. And it's one of the most active and organic communities that you're going to find online. There's constant, there's on most days, 40, 50, 60 new posts a day. Everybody just chimes in and helps and provides value. And it's a great community where, I've seen a lot of agents come in as new baby agents over the years. And, it's fun to just kind of see them really grow up. And a big part of it is they have this resource where they can come to the group and get counsel on things.
Good stuff, man. All right. You guys look up Christian, always putting out good content. And man, in this day and age, if you're not growing, it's like my grandpa used to say, if you leave the table hungry, it's your fault. So get out there, absorb some content. Christian said, be careful who you listen to. I'm telling you guys now, Christian's one that you can listen to. He's got your best interest at heart. Do want to thank you guys for tuning in. You guys have done a great job of commenting. Please like, please share, please subscribe. I love it when people share because you can get stuff out, you can share it, and then somebody else may get something completely different out of it, and you can help people out. Again, thank you all. Thank you to our producer. I got Adam and I got Celine in the booth making me look really, really good, which is not an easy task. Appreciate you guys. We will see you next time on the Medicare Sales Playbook. Have a great day.